First thing first, a little bit of history. So we were founded in 2007. The end of last year, we had over 10,000 merchants processing with us, and we had over 12 billion in volume. Something also happened at the end of last year. On December 19th, we joined the PayPal family. So we are now part of eBay Inc. organization. What is it that we do? We simplify payments for thousands of amazing companies. That means that we do everything that you need to accept a payment or credit card online or on a mobile device. Full stack offering to include all the technology, of course. What we aspire to do, well, we aspire to do for payments what Apple iOS did for mobile. So if you think about that for a second, if you go back into 2006, there were a lot of mobile devices that were smart devices, Palm and Nokia, but there weren't a lot of apps that were written to those devices. That's because if you wanted to roll out something, you had to understand the entire network and nuances behind T-Mobile and Sprint and AT&T. To build to that was challenging, so iOS, Apple came up with a great idea. Let's create a software layer. Let's insulate these developers from having to understand all these nuances, but still serve up the same amount of power that could be found in these networks. When we looked at payments, we saw the same thing. So we said, how can we start by looking at all the different front-end processors, back-end processors, and kind of build a technology and software layer around that that simplifies the way that merchants interact with that payment network. The idea being that if we could create a software layer that insulated them from having to understand all the pain around payments, something would happen. Developers would excel, and that's exactly what happened. So suddenly, we found ourselves working with some of the hottest name brands out there. So you have Uber, Airbnb, GitHub, Halo, Living Social, a number of clients that just erupted, to include folks on Magento platform as well, such as Bonobos or Teeks, Ellie, Adore Me, or Knockaround, right? Cool companies that were looking for something that said, we don't want to understand all the pain around payments, but we need to be able to accept those and make it seamless for us. One of the key differentiators, though, was the level of support that we applied. I think that when you think about support and payments, those tend to be two opposite things. Usually you can't pick up the phone and find a real human to actually answer those questions. Well, in our world, that's exactly what happens. So if you look and do a quick Google search, don't take my word for it only, look out there, do research on Braintree, and you find people like this. Someone wrote in to a Forbes article that was shocked when he picked up the phone and someone named Sarah answered it. And he stammered for a bit going, did I call the wrong people? And she says, no, actually it happens quite often. But we're here to help. We're real humans that pick up the phone. There's also a ton of tweets that go out there talking about Braintree and how that we solve payments needs for them and allow them to accelerate and grow. Specific to some of our Magento merchants, so Brian Wolf, Bonobos talking about how we streamline the checkout experience for folks that were online, for mobile channels, all to one convenient flow. And for Angry Birds, they were more focused on their global growth, to accept payments around the globe. We can simplify those needs. But it really starts with the technology. That at the heart of who Braintree is building amazing developer-centric products around that people can build these beautiful experiences against. And it starts with, how do you take all of the raw credit card information completely out of your environment? From a PCI standpoint, that's really important. You never want raw credit card information resident to your servers. So we're going to insulate you from that piece of that, which drops your actual PCI compliance by as much as 90%, right? So that you do have to fill out an SAQ-A form, most of which is 12 questions that says, hey, reach out to Braintree, or Braintree is responsible for this. But that's the piece that you have, but otherwise, we kind of insulate from that experience. Sandbox environments that are always current, of course, documentation that is human readable so that developers can really break into it and find different things that they want to build against, whether that's online, e-commerce, or again, mobile specific. We went so far as to say in that technology deployment that why don't we just code also and create libraries that are specific to the major different languages for developers. So, Braintree, we're a shop that loves Ruby. However, PHP is a very common one, right? Especially in the Magento world. So how do we make specific ones? And then focus on the mobile channel, make sure that we have specific SDKs for iOS, Android, and mobile web. Also, the ability as a merchant that is looking to scale from their first dollar to their billionth dollar, that's where Braintree really helps as well. So making sure that the scalability behind the platform is resident, right? So Living Social, the largest daily deal ever executed was 1.5 million transactions. That was 67 transactions per second. Now, as much as my developers don't like me to admit this, I know we've been stress tested to over 200 transactions per second, so huge throughputs to make sure that we don't buckle at that. The most important thing is that checkout experience, they continue to be able to move forward, right? Also, a company that invests in the back-end tools. I've seen a lot of different competitor solutions out there that haven't been updated in 10 plus years, right? So how is it that you create a tool that you're having to interact with so that it's convenient for them? That's something where Braintree is always iterating on technology. We're always finding the next thing that we can do to simplify the process. Giving an example of that, Wednesday of last week, we rolled out a whole new dispute control panel. Right? So this gave the ability for merchants, which is shocking. There are a lot of folks out here that probably still do a faxed payment for disputes, or they put ink to paper and mail, physically mail. Painful process. So we said, gosh, there should be an ability for us to click a button if I want to dispute. All the information, if you've collected CVV and AVS, just allow me to hit a button. We'll take care of the rest. If you have supporting documents attached to that, send along. Those are things that we're always iterating against. You'll be able to see it on the control dashboard. So you see, here are my disputes, or here's my decline ratio that's sitting, or volume that I'm having. So I can double click down, find reports at my fingertip. So we actually partnered up with a system integrator called RocketWeb, who Braintree is founded in Chicago. So RocketWeb is in the suburbs of Chicago. Great organization, because we said, we want to spend some serious heartbeats and investments around the actual extension that we have. So we know that we're going to migrate this, obviously, into the core as well, but that takes time. So we needed a first-class, world-class extension that took advantage of a lot of the different elements that our merchants were looking for. So we said, what is it that we can do? But I think what's also very important was we said extensions sometimes panic, different people out there that have different experience. But the idea here was to make sure that the actual extension was tested against all the major other extensions so it doesn't conflict. The idea being that if you have a system integrator that's out there that's certified, they should be able to download that and start accepting payments within 15 minutes. Right? So the actual extension itself does not cost anything. We want to make it simple for you to move forward. And we focused on kind of 6 main areas that we wanted to address. Fraud protection. For those of you who knows of Count as an example for a fraud solution provider, some hands. We'll go into that in a bit. We wanted to make sure that that solution was baked in, integrated as a component. PCI compliance, as addressed here just moments ago. But other things around multi-currency, reoccurring billing, vault, and account updater that kind of grows on each other. But breaking that down for fraud protection, I think that's an important one. So Count is a fantastic provider. So we actually looked at all the major players in there, and we said, ultimately landing at Count that said, this one's solid. So how can we actually use Braintree's scale, implement Count across all of our merchants? Because we found that it was that important, especially in the long tail. There are a lot of merchants that don't feel like they have any fraud, right? Eventually they will. So to that point, we said, you know what? We want to roll this out for everyone. And in fact, we don't even charge extra for it. So if you're working with different people out there, if you've interacted with solution providers, there's typically a cost for the extension, significant setup costs, anywhere that range from $10,000 to $20,000. Again, leveraging our scale, we said the implementation's done. We seamlessly do that. Again, that's our experience. We use technology to insulate merchants from having to deal with a whole bunch of noise and cumbersome integrations. So with that, we said, great, let's wrap in Count. Let's fold that across so that we can actually manage and look for different transaction history, but not have this significant cost investment, because we can say, here, let's build out verticals that can help manage these businesses' fraud. So what we're doing, though, is we're collecting transactional data, right? So billing address, device location, compare that information across the network to try to hone down on a specific focus that says this is a fraudster. Now, another piece of this is, depending on where the merchant is in their scale, a lot of times they don't want to take on all the analytics behind that, right? So we even manage that for them as well. Again, we've created verticals, as we know across all the different experience that we have, and we can continue to modify and tweak those. But as the business continues to scale, I was working with one as an example over the weekend, that wrapping up some things for them. Well, they're at $3.5 billion in processing. They have a dedicated team that does fraud. So they want tools and specifics and rules created specifically for them. Not a problem. It doesn't change the integration at all. We actually bring in Count to be able to set up and establish specific rules for them so it can say, this manages your business better. But it helps solve for that. The idea is that when you've done an integration here, we've got you from $1 to billion plus dollars, right? PCI compliance, again, key things there. We are definitely PCI DSS Level 1 certified. We have 24/7 redundant data centers and always looking for traffic there, right? 24/7 monitoring. So important piece there is, again, keep the raw credit card information out of your environments. Let us manage that part of it, right? Multi-currency. So I mentioned with Angry Birds that we're looking to expand globally. That's an area where we've really excelled very, very well. So today we're in major markets where most people are looking for, which is 40 different markets. That includes the United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia. So if we zoom down to our friends down south, Australia, you have folks like 99 Design or Envato, one of the largest providers down there in e-commerce space. Europe, we have Mojang, or if any of you play Minecraft as an example, The Economist or Halo Cab. And then over into Canada, Lightspeed and Top Hat Monocle are examples. But the reality is, out of 12 billion that we processed last year, over 25% was already on an international front. If you're also looking to accept multi-currency, many times if you have the business that's established here, but you just want presentment settled back into USD, not a problem. Of course, we can handle 130 different currencies from a presentment standpoint. And to date, we do some things that are kind of fun there. We don't apply additional FX costs. So when we get to the pricing discussion part of this, I mean, that's important, right? So today, it's whatever the daily strike price is that the brands Visa, MasterCard have issued. We move across, but we make it very seamless for our merchants. But it really wasn't some demands behind Living Social, Uber, Airbnb, a number of clients that had major international expansion needs. They needed to get to more complex situations where they've now domiciled themselves in Europe and in Australia because they want to take advantage of localized interchange as an example, or they want to do away with those annoying cross-border fees, both for themselves from a cost standpoint, as well as their customers. A customer absolutely hates it if they buy something in EUR, as an example, and they get this annoying issued cross-border fee. It's like, why am I getting this? We can solve for things because we have localized acquiring across the globe. In fact, that was a big part of the synergies when we looked at the acquisition with PayPal and Braintree, is we thought, gosh, PayPal, who better to actually tap into a network, a backbone of international expansion that could allow us to do some pretty amazing things, especially as you start thinking about things like complex, local payment methods. So you're going to start seeing a lot more things that we're going to be releasing here in the next coming months. And when I say coming months, we're talking short coming months. There's only so much I can talk about, but you'll see a lot of press around that as to how we've actually enabled merchants to be able to take on other payment methods. But again, all integrated into that same front-end, easy-to-use experience. Reoccurring billing. Key thing behind subscription billing, right, is that you need to be able to store all the vault information inside so that once you've entered that credit card information, it's tokenized. We pass back a token that gets managed through Magento, and then you can simply process the transaction again through a subscription or, importantly, as a future purchase again. That's really tied back to the vault itself. So collecting the address information, the credit card information, storing that securely, again, resident on our servers, and then passing back a token. One thing sometimes I forget to point out is it doesn't have to be a subscription billing. If a customer has gone to your site and they purchase something, of course, you want to take that information and store that in the vault. That way, if they come back for another purchase, you simply run it again, but you do not have to get their specific permission to go and run the transaction, right? Or rather, collect the credit card information. We want to make sure it's very seamless for a one-touch, one-tap checkout experience. That also rolls into Account Updater. Since we have that vault information, when we see folks like a lovely small company called Target seem to have lost a couple credit cards, I think most people saw that, well, that meant that all these consumers went out and changed their credit card information. So if you did have subscription billing, well, what happens to that process? I don't know about you, but I try to remember all the things that I get billed for. Some I wish I could forget, like the gym, but they seem to update mine really well. But anyway, you go out and you have to try to remember to update all your information. Well, instead, with Account Updater, we actually take that information and we're going to grab an update from Visa, right? Pull that down, update it, so that as the customer doesn't have to bother with updating the information and we don't have an increased decline. So just rolling in some of those things inherent to the platform are important. Then lastly, the thing that everyone always wants to know is, of course, on the pricing discussion, right? I think that's an area where Braintree has also made some pretty big pillar stances. So you have the technology piece, the support piece, and then you start moving into pricing. In this world, we find that people are not very transparent with their fees. In fact, on last Friday, I spent 2.5 hours looking at a statement. It was so confusing, and finally it was that eureka moment where I was like, they're actually taking the interchange from your successful transactions, and when you return them, they get the interchange back, but they don't pass the savings on to you. being able to kind of identify some of those things, which was very meaningful. It was a 50 basis points drop for this particular merchant. I was floored by it because we do some things that are just very simple. So transparent pricing with that means that you don't have representment fees, statement fees, maintenance fees, all these other things. We're going to be straightforward. You have two options. You're either going to have this set up as a bundled rate, so think of it as 2.9 and 30, whatever that all you can drink, if you will, type of a transaction, or of course interchange plus. As a business continues to scale, in some cases that makes a lot more sense, which is the underlying interchange cost. There's a normal margin that resides across the top of that. So everything else, there are no other maintenance fees or anything that's tied to it. It's very simple to see. As an example, if it's on the interchange plus model, at the end of the month you get two charges. One is for your interchange cost, one is for any of the discount that's applied on top of that. Very simple to balance back and know exactly what you were charged for.